This is the Liz Wheeler Show. We are live, per usual, across all platforms on the internet. We are live on X. We are live on YouTube. We're live on Facebook. We're live on Rumble. Guys, we have significant developments that happened following the show yesterday, during which we exposed who is funding the illegal alien riots in Los Angeles. The riots are not organic, I can tell you that. They're not grassroots. They are staged. They are intentional. They are deliberate. They are political. The word I used yesterday to describe the riots that are happening in LA are violent and a violent vanguard. A vanguard is the moment that communists take all of their preparation, their infiltration of institutions, their subversion of our government, and they actually change from this planning stage into their active stage where they try to impose communism on us. That's what we are seeing out in LA. We exposed, thanks to the investigative work of Data Republican, we exposed the groups and the man who is funding the groups, funding the protests, the riots that we're seeing out in Los Angeles. And shortly after the show, Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna announced that the United States Congress would be requesting documents from Neville Singum. That's the billionaire socialist that we mentioned yesterday. That might have not even accurately described Neville Singum's radical political views. He's actually a communist. He's hiding out in communist China right now. But this was Congresswoman Luna's announcement. She said, thanks to the investigative work of Data Republican, House Oversight will issue a formal document request to Neville Singum regarding his funding of a communist group linked to the LA riots and the CCP, that is the Chinese Communist Party. If he refuses to appear, he will be subpoenaed. And if he ignores that, he will be referred to the Department of Justice for prosecution. Now, let's quickly recap what we covered yesterday. Who is behind the illegal alien protests that we're seeing in LA? We're seeing gasoline poured on the engines of cars and those cars lit on fire. We're seeing rocks hurled at law enforcement vehicles. We are seeing these rioters surround ICE facilities. We are seeing highways shut down by these individuals who are wearing keffiyehs, waving Mexican flags, saying that we all have an enemy and America is that enemy. So who's behind this? If it's not grassroots, and it's not, if it's coordinated, and it is, who's behind it? Well, a couple of organizations are behind it. One of the primary groups, this is the group, for example, that printed all of the protest signs. This group is called the PSL, the Party for Socialism and Liberation. And if you look at their Wikipedia page, they self-describe as a communist party. In fact, they are a faction of the larger Communist Party here in the United States. They just had internal disputes, so they factioned off and made their own party. They are a communist party. Well, they printed the signs for this protest. Who paid for that? Well, the signs, not just the signs, the PSL, the Party for Socialism and Liberation, is largely funded by a billionaire named Neville Singum. And we can show a picture of this guy. It's always the people you most expect. He looks like a villain if you ever saw one. Neville Singum funds the Party for Socialism and Liberation, one of the groups that's primarily responsible for these riots. And we're going to get back to Neville Singum. We're actually going to do a deep dive on Neville Singum in the show today because it's Neville Singum who's being called before the United States Congress. Allegedly, he is accused of violating the FARA law. He has never registered as a foreign agent, and yet he is working on behalf of the Chinese communists. Again, we're going to do a deeper dive into that in just a couple minutes. One of the other groups that's playing a large role in these illegal alien riots out in LA is a group called CHIRLA, CHIRLA, CHIRLA. Now, CHIRLA's activities are primarily funded by taxpayers. We talked about this on yesterday's show, but yesterday, we didn't specify which taxpayers are the ones bearing the brunt of paying for CHIRLA's activities. First of all, in last fiscal year alone, CHIRLA received $34 million in taxpayer grants, is what they're called. And on the show yesterday, I might have said that it was federal money, or I might have not mentioned where that money came from, which part of the government, but it wasn't federal money. This was money that came from the state of California. $34 million went from the state of California Department of Social Services to Chirla. That's 72% of Chirla's total revenue. And that's, by the way, 3 times as much money as Chirla received in the previous year. So not only is this still very bad, taxpayers are literally funding these violent riots. It means that the person responsible is the person responsible for the administration of the government in California, which is, of course, the governor, Gavin Newsom. Thanks to Gavin Newsom, who is pretending to condemn the violence, even though he doesn't condemn the violence. He's just using this to try to get attention by fighting with Trump. Gavin Newsom's California government gave $34 million to this organization. And this Chirla organization, by the way, they are still receiving federal taxpayer money. They received $450,000 in a federal grant in 2023. The woman responsible for helping Chirla secure that $450,000 federal grant was, of course, the mayor of the city of Los Angeles, Karen Bass, a political warlord, as we covered on the show yesterday. If there ever was one, if you missed that episode, go back, listen to the whole breakdown of who Karen Bass is. We talked yesterday about the fact that she's not a DEI hire. She's not just this dumb figurehead of a politician. She is deeply embedded in what Mike Benz has termed the blob. Mayor Karen Bass, before she was the mayor of Los Angeles, worked for an NGO, a non-governmental organization called the National Endowment for Democracy, which, even though it's a non-governmental organization, it was funded by the U.S. government. It was specifically funded by U.S. aid. NED, the National Endowment for Democracy, is a CIA front group. Their purpose is to foment color revolutions abroad. A color revolution is essentially regime change. It's toppling a regime in a foreign country, but using what looks like grassroots protests and riots as the impetus for that regime change. If that looks like what you're seeing in Los Angeles, if that looks similar, it's because that's exactly what we're seeing in Los Angeles. So Mayor Karen Bass is a political warlord, and she's the one who helped Chirla, this pro-illegal alien group, receive $450,000 in federal taxpayer dollars in 2023. Now, Chirla is not only one of the primary groups behind the protests out in LA today, they have a history. If you go back to 2018, you remember the Abolish ICE movement during the first Trump administration? Yeah, that was Chirla. Chirla was behind the Abolish ICE, and Chirla operates this group. They call it a rapid response team. But what they do is they dispatch their rapid response team to the ground for just such a moment when they need a protest to appear organic. So yesterday on the show, we mentioned that there were groups that were essentially protest for hire, protesters for hire, rioters for hire. Again, that's Chirla. So again, a recap of yesterday's episode. If you want to experience the deeper dive into each one of these things, the Communist Party that's printing the signs, that's fomenting these riots, Karen Bass, this mayor who's a political warlord, and Chirla, watch yesterday's episode. Today's episode, we're building on what we talked about yesterday because we are going to do a deep dive into the man who is giving money to the Communist Party, the man who is not just giving money to this Communist Party, but is hiding out in China. The man you see on the screen, Neville Singum, he's hiding out in China. He shares an office with a Chinese propaganda firm whose goal we'll talk about in just a minute. His wife is a prominent figure who you'll recognize globally for her activities, and you will not believe the connection between the groups that Neville Singum funds and the unrest that we have seen here in the United States. Not just the riot that we're seeing out in Los Angeles, these anti-ICE, pro-illegal alien riots, but other violence as well. All of that and more today on the Liz Wheeler Show. Today's episode is proudly sponsored by All Family Pharmacy. You and I both know the cost of healthcare in America is completely out of control. Prescription drugs specifically are often way more expensive here than in any other country, which is just unfair. Americans have been paying the highest drug prices in the world for far too long. It's insane that our politicians allowed us to be taken advantage of like that. Thankfully, that's finally starting to change thanks to President Trump. He just signed a new executive order to bring those prices down, and it's definitely a step in the right direction. It won't take immediate effect. So while the system catches up, All Family Pharmacy is stepping up. They're not waiting around for policy to kick in. They are taking action now to benefit you. from now through June 30th, you can get 20% off all medications, no insurance required. We're talking about real access to meds like antibiotics, ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, daily maintenance meds, and more. They have over 200 different medication options, and they ship really fast, and they include a doctor's prescription with your shipment. Go check them out. allfamilypharmacy.com/Liz. Use the code Liz20 to claim your 20% off. Listen, All Family Pharmacy exists because you value your medical freedom, and All Family Pharmacy respects you. Go to allfamilypharmacy.com/Liz. Use code Liz20 for 20% off. That's allfamilypharmacy.com/Liz. Use code Liz20 for 20% off. Okay. So again, we established this yesterday, but there's been an even greater escalation in the violence that we're seeing out in LA. CNN and ABC and Mayor Karen Bass and Gavin Newsom, essentially the entire apparatus of the radical left, from the elected politicians to their propagandists in the mainstream media, are gaslighting you. The definition of gaslighting is trying to make you feel like you're crazy for acknowledging the reality of what you see with your own eyes. So you see protesters with pro-Hamas, pro-terrorism keffiyehs over their faces, dousing cars in gasoline and lighting that on fire. That's not violence, you silly little crazy Republican. That's just free speech. That's just their First Amendment right to protest the government, protest the Trump administration, who's evil. That's gaslighting. That's what we're seeing. The reality of what we're seeing, you're right, of course, because you have eyes, you can see, you have common sense, you're not stupid. What you're seeing out in LA is extreme violence. It's political violence. It's actually revolutionary violence. But last night, protesters began to try to breach the LAPD headquarters. They began to try to break the windows of the precinct building. We can play this video on the screen so you can see what's happening here. And they're using what look like skateboards. They are masked, of course, and they're not afraid of COVID. It's not that kind of mask. So what's really interesting, and we're gonna talk about this a little later in the show too, is they're using skateboards because that makes it seem like their violent actions are spur of the moment. It makes it seem like they might be acting with righteous indignation, that this is just a bunch of people coming together as a community to voice their outrage over a political policy. But that is part of the strategy of the groups who are behind organizing this protest, is they are going to great lengths to camouflage the fact that this has been a pre-planned revolutionary vanguard riot. This has been pre-planned for a long time. And we're going to talk about some of the tools that you can see in these crowds. We'll break it down, specifically the riot gear and how it's made to look homemade. It's made to look like they just quickly put it together before they ran out the door and congregated on the streets, but that is not the case. That is not true. That is not the reality. We also saw last night that protesters were beginning to pass around Bionic face shields. I think we have an image of this as well. Bionic face shields, you just happen to have a couple of these in the car, right? You just ran in CVS and got Bionic face shields for your peaceful protest to exercise your free speech. I know I always bring along a Bionic face shield when I go out with the intention of being peaceful and normal. No, this is a weirdo thing to do. You only pass around Bionic face shields if you have the money to buy them and if you have anticipated that you are going to be engaging in violence. Both things, of course, are exactly what these rioters anticipated. This was pre-planned. It was funded. Therefore, they have Bionic face shields because they are anticipating essentially military altercations with either law enforcement, state or local law enforcement, or the Marines that President Trump has sent in. Okay, so the shields. Let's talk about the shields first, actually, while we're talking about this equipment. So there's a great thread that went around on X yesterday by Local Distance talking about specifically the shields. Yeah, we're bringing it up on the screen here. So if you look at some of these shields carried by these protesters, scroll down just a little bit. Oh, yeah. See the orange, the row of red, purple, pink, yellow, red, blue shields right there? It's the second one down. Yeah. That bottom picture on the left, Spencer, if you click on that. Okay, so those shields at first glance look like they might be produced by people in their garage. Maybe, they got a text from a friend. We're going to protest on the streets of LA, put together a sign, kind of reminiscent of, the Women's March, where you're holding up some sign that was obviously written on your kid's poster board with a magic marker as you ran out, dropped your kids off at daycare and ran out the door. That's what these are intended to look like, but that is not the reality of what these are. So according to Local Distance, I want to read a little bit of this thread. He goes, first, notice the protesters have shields. These types of shields were used by the 2024 pro-Hamas rioters, that's picture number 2, and the 2020 BLM rioters, picture 3. I guess that's what we're showing right now is the BLM shields. Each shield takes 3 hours to make, and activists spend all day making them. That's not spontaneous. It takes planning. Those shields, go down to the next tweet, Spencer, if you can. Those shields are not cardboard signs. They are designed to look like cardboard signs. They are in fact made of plywood, and they have metal handles as seen in the pictures below. They have a cardboard sign attached to the front to disguise the fact that they are made of wood. The next tweet shows this. In 2020, these shields were brought in and distributed to rioters in organized drops. That's what you're seeing in the video that's playing on the left side of the screen. In LA, we see the same strategy. They hand out protective equipment to rioters, that's picture number 2, and then use them in the attacks. Note the same Home Depot bucket in picture number 2 and picture number 3. Local Distance says it isn't just the shields that are planned. Everything is, from what rioters wear to the tactics used in each situation. They're implementing highly developed theory of protest violence in order to create pressure and to try to force politicians to give in. So again, that rioter who was wearing a mask, not because he was afraid of COVID, when he used that skateboard to smash the windows of the LAPD precinct building, that might appear to be something that's grassroots, but it's not. All of this, the phrase that I used yesterday on the show is none of this is real. None of it is what it seems to be. It is staged. The violence itself is real, but it is not righteous indignation. It's not a group of citizens raising their voices. It is coordinated. It's pre-planned. It's intended to be revolutionary violence. And that brings us to the man behind this violence, the man who's giving the money, funding the groups that are out on the streets. That is Neville Singum. And we're going to do a deep dive into this guy because not only is Congress acknowledging now that this man is probably violating the law. He's never registered as a foreign agent. And yet he is operating on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party, doing not just funding the groups that are behind the violent riots in LA, but funding civil unrest here in the United States, some of the worst that we've seen in decades. We're going to get to that in just a second because we have some questions for Congress to ask Neville Singum, and we want to give you an illustration of who this man is. But first, I want to talk about a sponsor of this show who I'm really grateful for the work that they do on the streets of the United States every day. According to a recent bombshell report, the abortion pill is literally 10 times more dangerous than the FDA claims. In other words, the FDA says, less than 1% of women suffer adverse events as a result of taking this pill. But a new, more comprehensive study shows that actually 11% of women experience serious adverse effects after taking this pill. That means more than 1 out of every 10 women who take this pill. Now, horrifyingly, the landscape of abortion has changed, and the abortion pill now accounts for over 60% of abortions in this country. So do the math here. An average of over 1 million babies are aborted annually in the United States. That's 66,000 women who will be harmed, suffer adverse events, harm by the abortion pill just this year alone. And this is what the left tells us is women's healthcare. I don't think so. Let me tell you what real healthcare looks like. Preborn's network of clinics saved over 67,000 babies last year. Because Preborn not only provides for the physical and emotional needs of mothers, they also share hope for the soul through God's love in the gospel. Once a woman sees her baby on an ultrasound screen and hears that baby's heartbeat, her baby's chance at life doubles because moms look at their baby and they realize, oh my goodness, that is a child inside of me and I love that child. One ultrasound, which can be the difference between life and death, is just $28. And $140 helps to rescue 5 babies from being aborted. Any gift will help. All gifts are tax deductible. To donate, and I highly encourage you to, if you're able, simply dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby. That's pound 250, keyword baby, or visit preborn.com/Liz. That's preborn.com/Liz. And I know this won't be possible for all of you, but I also know some of you watching this show are going to feel this call in your heart. Abortion, unfortunately, even though Roe v. Wade has been overturned, abortion continues to rise. Preborn is expanding their life-affirming care as a result of this rise in abortion to the darkest corners of our nation to help more of these hurting women, to save more of these precious babies. If you have the means, would you consider a leadership gift to save babies in a big way? Your tax-deductible donation of $15,000 will place a machine in a needy women's center, saving countless of lives for years to come. If you have the means, I encourage you, I challenge you, make this gift today. Visit preborn.com/Liz. That's preborn.com/Liz. Okay, Neville Singum. Let's talk about Neville Singum. We mentioned him on the show yesterday because this communist party in the United States called PSL, the Party for Socialism and Liberation. It's essentially the Communist Party here in the United States splintered as a result of internal conflict. Surprise, surprise, they're communists. And one of the splintered groups renamed itself the Party for Socialism and Liberation, but they are self-described as a communist party. The man who funds the Party for Socialism and Liberation, again, the Party for Socialism and Liberation are behind the illegal alien riots in LA. They are printing the signs in addition to coordinating individuals showing up for the protests. The man who gives most of PSL's money to them is this man on the screen. His name is Neville Singum. He's standing there with his wife. Her name is Jody Evans. Jody Evans, you might say, wait a second, do I recognize that name? The answer is yes, you do. Jody Evans is the founder of Code Pink. Code Pink, picture those videos that we sometimes see of feminists shirtless protesting, quote unquote, anti-war protests. That's Jody Evans's group, the founder of Code Pink. They're actually somewhat violent, radical, quote unquote, anti-war protesters. Neville Singum is married to her. They currently live in Shanghai, China, with the special permission of the Chinese Communist Party, which should tell you something about how close the relationship is between Neville Singum and the Chinese Communist Party. Now, one of the things at the protests out in these riots out in LA that you noticed, we talked about this yesterday, is the keffiyehs that a lot of these rioters were wearing. The keffiyehs are those checkered neckerchiefs that Hamas wears. They're a symbol now in the United States at these pro-Palestine, pro-Hamas rallies. They're a symbol of standing with Hamas, standing against Israel, standing in favor of the terror attacks that slaughtered innocent Israelis and innocent Americans on October 7th. Those keffiyehs, you can see it on the screen. This is one of the leaders of the riots yesterday. He's wearing it wrapped around his face so that you can't tell who he is. And he's talking about how the enemy that they are standing up to, that the rioters are fighting against, is America. So this is a common thing that we're seeing at these violent illegal alien riots in LA, these keffiyehs. Well, it's no coincidence that we're seeing these keffiyehs at the riots in LA because Neville Singum funds pro-Hamas groups on college campuses all across the country. Let me give you an example. Arizona State University, there was a pro-Palestine rally at Arizona State University that turned violent. You probably remember seeing this in the news. It resulted in over 70 people being arrested. And originally, the reports were, 70 students who were out protesting were arrested. But it turned out that the people arrested at this pro-Palestine rally at Arizona State University that turned violent weren't actually students of Arizona State University. So they were on campus. They were ostensibly protesting, but it wasn't really a protest. It was a riot. It was violent. Who were these if they weren't students? It turns out they were members of the PSL, members of the Communist Party that calls itself the Party for Socialism and Liberation. Now, the PSL often joins forces with another group that I know you're familiar with called the SJP. Students for Justice in Palestine. Now, Students for Justice in Palestine is a name you're probably more familiar with than the Party for Socialism and Liberation, because the Students for Justice in Palestine is the group that is typically associated with the radical BDS supporting pro-Hamas groups that we see on college campus. We kind of already have this awareness of the association between Students for Justice in Palestine and the radical pro-Hamas activity that we see on college campuses, especially if you think about Harvard and Columbia and a lot of the really, really nasty, vicious, pro-Hamas, anti-Israel, anti-Semitic stuff that we see from those campuses. That's usually associated with the Students for Justice in Palestine. Now, the reason that we're talking about Students for Justice in Palestine is not just because they happen to have similar goals for the Party for Socialism and Liberation. It's not just because they happen to have worked together a couple of times. The reason this is important is because not only is the Party for Socialism and Liberation funded by Neville Singum, so is Students for Justice in Palestine. Oh, so suddenly this is not just a man who is giving money for signs to be made in the violent riots, the violent anti-ICE, pro-illegal alien riots out in LA. Suddenly, we're getting a larger picture of the civil unrest that is being deliberately fomented by groups that are being paid by Neville Singum to do this. Now, the way that these groups often operate, they operate in a financially convoluted manner for a reason. Because oftentimes the wealthy people, billionaire like Neville Singum or a foundation, some wealthy person's foundation, they don't necessarily want the attention on themselves individually. They don't want to be known as the person behind the illegal alien riots in LA. Too bad for Neville Singum if he feels that way. We have exposed him thanks to Data Republican's original reporting. Now Congress is going to call him to the United States Congress. But the way that the Party for Socialism and Liberation has received Neville Singum's money is through an organization called the Answer Coalition. The Answer Coalition is the majority of their funding comes from Neville Singum. Now, I know this is really convoluted. I know it's a tangled web, and that's the way they intend it. They want it to be a tangled web because they don't want us to do the proverbial thing, follow the money. They don't want us to untangle this. They want us to believe the gaslighting that we hear from the mainstream media, that it's a lawful protest with some unrest. I will never get past hearing that yesterday from CNN. A lawful protest with some unrest. Just like CNN told us that Black Lives Matter torching Kenosha, Wisconsin was a fiery but mostly peaceful protest. They want us to think it's organic. They want us to think it's grassroots. They want us to think the majority of Americans are against Trump's immigration policy, but that is not true. The truth of the matter is Neville Singum, who looks like the villain that he is, has made a lot of his money by peddling Chinese propaganda. We said this on the show yesterday, but let's unpack what I mean when I say that. What does that mean? What is the history of Neville Singum? Neville Singum got involved with radical ideologies. We're talking Leninism, communism, Marxism, all the way back in the 1970s. Neville Singum was once subject to an FBI investigation because of his association with subversive groups in the United States. So Neville Singum has been on the radar of law enforcement based on his influence and his power and his ideological goal for the U.S. for literally decades. Neville Singum, as early as, I think it was 2000, 2001, served as a consultant for almost a decade to Huawei. You remember Huawei. Huawei was a big story a couple years ago because they were going to be in charge of building the 5G towers here in the United States. And then whistleblowers said, wait a second, Huawei, they're essentially an arm of the Chinese Communist Party's espionage apparatus. They are going to, if we allow them to be part of the 5G grid in the United States, we are giving all of our information, all of it, to the Chinese Communist Party. Well, Neville Singum was part of that. He was a consultant advocating for Huawei for almost a decade. And now, as I said, he lives in China. He lives in Shanghai with special permission from the Chinese Communist Party. In fact, Neville Singum shares an office space with a group called Shanghai Maku Cultural Communications Limited. What is Shanghai Maku Cultural Communications Limited? They are a propaganda firm of the Chinese Communist Party, and their goal, their mission, is to present a positive image of the Chinese Communist Party to the global South. So when we say that Neville Singum is a puppet of the Chinese Communist Party, that he is a paid mouthpiece of the Chinese Communist Party, you can see it based on his history. You can see it based on his movements. So let's go back to his wife for a minute, Jody Evans. Jody Evans is the founder of Code Pink, who we already knew they're not just a quote unquote anti-war. They're not just a pacifist organization. They're an organization that camouflages themselves as a pacifist organization, but really it's like the pro-Palestinian groups. They're not really advocating for humanitarian treatment of Palestinian people. They are pretending to do so while actually advocating against Western civilization. That's the same thing as Jody Evans's group, Code Pink. They're not actually worried about the war in Iraq. They're not actually worried about the war in Gaza. What they actually have as their mission, even if it's a secret mission, even if they don't admit this, they actually have the subversion of Western civilization. And again, the reason that we're talking about her is because she plays a role in Neville Singum's in his conglomeration of groups, his association with the Chinese Communist Party. There have been reports that Jody Evans's organization Code Pink now receives the majority of its funding from organizations funded by Neville Singum. And so, again, the association with the Chinese Communist Party. Jody Evans has a book coming out. It's about to be published called, wait for it, China is Not Our Enemy. Okay, well, think about the propaganda organization that shares an office space with Neville Singum in Shanghai, dedicated to presenting a positive image of the CCP. And the guy's wife has a book coming out called China is Not Our Enemy. You cannot make this stuff up. As people like Karen Bass and Gavin Newsom tell us that this is organic, it's peaceful, it's First Amendment rights. No. It's not grassroots. The anti-ICE protests, the illegal alien riots are not organic. They're not real. They are violent. They are a vanguard. Neville Singum also runs an entire network of pro-Palestinian groups. Data Republican reports that this is at the behest of the Chinese Communist Party. We are attempting to verify that the Chinese Communist Party has given him direction to do so. Almost impossible to verify that. Of course, the circumstantial evidence points to that being true and accurate. Marco Rubio had formerly, during the Biden administration, formally requested that Biden's Attorney General Merrick Garland investigate Neville Singum for violations of the Foreign Agent Registration Act, a FARA violation. Of course, Joe Biden also has his ties to the Chinese Communist Party. Hunter Biden's infamous ties, his billions of dollars in equity deals with the Chinese Communist Party after Joe Biden softened his stances on all things Chinese communism. So we can't. It would have been unrealistic to expect the Joe Biden administration to give Attorney General Merrick Garland the green light on that one. But thank goodness for based members of the United States Congress, like Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna, who she sits on the Oversight Committee, has now made a formal document request of Neville Singum to transparently expose exactly where his money is going and the funding that he is providing for the Communist Party, the Party for Socialism and Liberation, as well as Students for Justice in Palestine, and these groups that are associated with, that are at the forefront of these illegal alien riots in Los Angeles. It's a lot, isn't it? It's a lot. If there is a law that has been broken, and there is a law that has been broken by Neville Singum, then the Trump administration should hold him to account, should hold him to the highest level of justice possible. Because think about this. This is not just a domestic issue here in the United States. This is not just, should we have open borders? Should we not have open borders? This is not just, and I hate to even belittle what I'm about to say, this is not just Mexico trying to import drugs and humans via human trafficking. This is not just foreign gangs like MS-13 and Tren de Aragua coming from Venezuela trying to subvert our nation. This is even bigger than that. The Chinese Communist Party wants nothing more than civil unrest in the United States. The Chinese Communist Party will pay for domestic chaos in the United States. The Chinese Communist Party's plan, and they are very, very patient in how long it takes to execute their plans step by step. They will wait 100 years to make sure that this plan is executed in a way that is effective, they want nothing more than to subvert the United States from within. The Chinese communists don't want to go to kinetic war with the United States. The Chinese communists don't want nuclear war with us. The Chinese communists crave international domination. They want to be the one world superpower. And in order to do so, they have to unseat the United States because currently we occupy that position. So what do? Well, they infiltrate us. We know that. They infiltrate our tech fields, our STEM fields. They infiltrate our universities. They've bought up movie theaters all around the United States. They fund Hollywood so that they can insert Chinese communist propaganda into our movies and remove anything that might negatively portray the Chinese communists and create a negative perception in people's minds of what communism really is. The Chinese communists are buying up farmland. The Chinese communists spy on us. The Chinese communists steal our intellectual property. The Chinese communists engage in cheating while trading with the United States. They devalue their own currency intentionally in violation of international law in order to take advantage of us. The Chinese communists want nothing more than to corrupt our civil institutions in our country, to cause chaos and destruction in our neighborhoods and our cities. They want to sow civil unrest. Why? So that our country falls. So that they can then take over as the dominant world superpower. So yeah, of course the Chinese communists pay evil creatures like Neville Singum to sow unrest in the United States. Anything to create these riots, anything to turn one American against each other, anything to try to subvert the fabric of our nation. So Students for Justice in Palestine, the pro-Hamas riots, the pro-illegal alien riots, open border stuff, he's involved in all of it. In all of it. Now, there are some other groups that are involved in these riots. It's not just Neville Singum. Neville Singum seems to be one of the primary figures, but Data Republican has some information about some other groups that are also involved. We'll go through those groups in here in just a second. But first, if you own a home, if you have purchased a house, then you have to listen to this. There is a new crime that the FBI has begun to call home stealing. And you might think, oh, what does the crook do? Just put your house in their backpack and walk off with it? Kind of. Yeah, that actually is just about how it works. So you know how when you buy a house, you get the title of your house. It's in your name. And it's usually with the county registrar. That's where it's kept. Well, since you have purchased your house, have you ever checked on your home title? If you're like me, you have not, but you're going to want to after you hear this, because there's a new crime that's being committed, and it's unfortunately increasingly easy to commit this crime in today's AI and cyber world. But scammers are stealing home titles, and the reason they're stealing your home title is so that they can get access to your equity. Here's how it works. Criminals forge your signature on just one document. That you can use a fake notary stamp to make this look official. You then pay a small fee with your county, and that's literally all it takes for your home title to be transferred out of your name and into the name of the crook. So once they've done that, then they use the equity of, ostensibly saying, we own this home. And they take out loans. Sometimes they even sell your property, and you don't even know either of those things have happened until you receive a collection notice in the mail. Aren't you going to pay back this loan? Or a foreclosure notice, get out of the house. You sold the house. That's why you need to stop what you're doing and find out today if you are a victim. You can use my promo code Liz at HometitleLock.com. Make sure your title is still in your name. That's HometitleLock.com. Use my promo code Liz. If you use my promo code, you will get a free title history report to see if these crooks are checking on your title. Plus, you'll get a free 14-day trial of their $1 million triple lock protection. There are a lot of companies that claim to protect your title, but the reason Home Title Lock is different and better is because not only do they provide 24/7 monitoring of your title, they will give you an urgent alert if anybody tries to make any changes. But what sets them apart is if fraud should happen, Home Title Lock will spend up to $1 million to fix it, to get your home title back to you. So go to HometitleLock.com now. Use my promo code Liz. That's HometitleLock.com, promo code Liz. Okay, so are there other groups associated with these pro-illegal alien riots in LA? According to Data Republican, the answer is yes. There are other groups, NGOs, these non-governmental organizations that are often funded by the United States government. So Data Republican reports, she says, 2 related groups, Union del Barrio and Community Self-Defense Coalition, both organized protests associated with these riots. Centra CSO, an ally, had the ability to organize people quickly. She said neither of these organizations is a registered nonprofit. Both Union del Barrio and CSDC are informal organizations, hence do not have IENs. That's obviously a business number associated. Ron Gochez, that's a name to remember, served as a spokesman for both groups, though, during a press conference. Ron Gochez. The same Ron Gochez was the former chairman of MECA, MECHA. He also called for a Mexican revolution in the United States. MECA has significant violent pro-Hamas elements. Funny how this crossover that we're seeing between this pro-Hamas, the violent pro-Hamas rioters in the United States and these anti-ICE pro-illegal alien. It's the same people. It's the same people. Ron Gochez. Ron Gochez, and we're going to scroll down. Although CSDC and Union del Barrio are ostensibly grassroots, they are well organized. Gochez bragged about being able to cover large areas quickly and simultaneously. Data Republican notes that translation means nothing about what you're seeing is spontaneous. And an allied group, Centra CSO, bragged about their rapid response network. Again, think about rioters for hire. There are a lot of these groups that are essentially rioters for hire. Down at the bottom of this thread, Spencer, you can scroll all the way down past a lot of this stuff. And if you want to do a deep dive into some of these groups, I highly recommend it. But down at the bottom, the very bottom of this thread, you will find a video of Ron Gochez, again, a spokesman for 2 of these so-called rapid response groups, calling not just for a Mexican revolution against the United States, but for a revolution against white people. And of course, he calls white people racist white people, because in the eyes of these Marxists, they're using, critical race theory. Critical race theory is a Marxist theory, a neo-Marxist theory, that has to pit it's the same Marxist dialectic, right? To pit the oppressed against the so-called oppressors. Well, in the eyes of using a critical race theory lens, it's the white people who are the oppressors and anybody who is not white as the oppressed. So you have to call all white people racist at all times based only on the color of their skin in order to make this Marxist dialectic work, at least rhetorically work. So Ron Gochez, and this goes all the way back. This guy's been a radical for a long time. This was back in 2010. So pre-critical race theory in schools era, Ron Gochez was calling for a revolution against white people. These are the people behind the protests out in LA, the riots. I shouldn't even be using the word protest. Behind the violence that we're seeing out in LA. And then, of course, we have what I consider to be somewhat humorously ironic. Tom Homan, we're going to bring this up on the screen. This was reported by Peter Schweizer. Tom Homan was asked about the ICE raids that these rioters are ostensibly protesting against. We know that's not the real reason they have a problem with this. But Peter Schweizer posted on X last night and said Donald Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, revealed that the raids that sparked the violent LA riots were not for immigration purposes. Homan explained that the raids that took place in downtown Los Angeles on Friday were part of a criminal investigation into a money laundering scheme and cartel activity. It wasn't an immigration raid. It was to service of 3 criminal warrants at locations based on a large criminal conspiracy that ICE is investigating. This is what Tom Homan told MSNBC. Again, humorously ironic, is it not? We already knew that this narrative that these violent rioters are using. It's just propaganda. They're saying that they're against Donald Trump's immigration policies. That's not true. The majority of the American people actually support Donald Trump's immigration policies. But it's funny to me to see it exposed in real time. It's funny to me to see these lies exposed in real time. Okay, so then of course we have an LA City Council member who, again, it's worth understanding just who these politicians are and the role that the politicians, the media, the NGOs, and their financial backers play in this whole revolutionary vanguard riot strategy. So there's an LA City Council member who I want to show you a video of her response to law enforcement doing what they're supposed to do, doing their duty and making an effort to stop the violence that's happening. I'm going to show you a video of this woman in just a second here. But first, I want to talk to you about American Heart for Gold. Listen, Joe Biden did a lot of damage. And a lot of that damage, we can make fun of him for being senile. We can expose the fact that, you know, Jill Biden's flamboyantly gay best friend has been reported by David Hogg, who up until about a week ago was a vice chair at the DNC, for being the person controlling Joe Biden's auto pen. And we should keep doing that. But we should also understand that a lot of what came out of the Biden administration, regardless of whether it was Biden that did it or Anthony Bernal, we have to understand the reality that it's still hurting us. The impacts of those policies is damaging to our families, especially when it comes to inflation and financial issues. We're not only still paying more for things like houses and cars and food. Donald Trump can't change that overnight because the damage has already been inflicted. The healing from that damage takes time, but it's also a wake-up call for us because this is a strategy that politicians are using now. Leftist politicians are using this strategy to try to control us. They're using our money. That's why they want us to transition away from a fiat currency to a digital dollar. They want to, because they can control us using that money. They can tell us what we can buy, what we can't buy. They can penalize us for behavior and speech. They can debank us and unperson us. And let me tell you, you have to take control of your own wealth so that this doesn't happen to you. Do not let your life savings become a casualty of failing banks or currency wars. Now is the time to call the only precious metal dealer that I trust, American Heart for Gold. They will show you how to protect your savings, your retirement accounts by diversifying your wealth portfolio with physical gold and silver. American Heart for Gold is a great company. They support content like this because we are committed to the truth. So tell them that I sent you. They'll give you up to $15,000 of free silver on your first order. You can call them right now. Click the link in the description of this episode or call 866-996-5172. That's 866-996-5172 or text Liz to 998899. Again, that's 866-996-5172 or text Liz to 998899. Okay. So out in Los Angeles, we have illegal alien riots, violent riots that are happening. They're not organic. They're not grassroots. They're not real. They are violent. You know this because you have eyes and you're not dishonest. You can see exactly what you're seeing. You see cars being set on fire. You see glass being broken at the police station. You see law enforcement being assaulted. You see highways being shut down. You can see what's happening. Again, you're not stupid. The mainstream media might think you're stupid. Democrats might think you're stupid, but you're not. We understand that this is coordinated by someone and paid for by someone. And that someone is Neville Singum, this billionaire who lives in China. He shares an office with Chinese Communist Party propaganda firm that's dedicated to trying to advance Chinese communist interests all around the world. This isn't a coincidence. It's a name that we should know. Thank goodness Congress is now going to subpoena Neville Singum's documents. If he doesn't voluntarily respond to this document request, they're going to subpoena him, force him to disclose how he funds the Communist Party group that organized the illegal alien riot out in LA. This is so convoluted. It's so complex. I mean, oh, what a tangled web we weave is the definition. It's the thesis of the Democrat Party right now. This is what they're trying to do. But they couldn't do what they're doing without the mainstream media serving as propaganda arms, and they couldn't do it without Democrat politicians like Karen Bass, the political warlord, and Gavin Newsom, the villainous liar, the lying villain. They couldn't do it without politicians like that. Well, Gavin Newsom's at the state level. Karen Bass is at the county level. She's the mayor of Los Angeles. But then you have city council members like Eunice Hernandez, who are as radical as the rioters in the streets. Eunice Hernandez responded to law enforcement saying, hey, actually, you can't commit these kind of acts of violence. It's against the law, by threatening law enforcement with violence. This is what she said.
They know how quickly we mobilize. That's why they're changing tactics. Because community defense works and our resistance has slowed them down before. And if they're escalating their tactics, then so are we. When they show up, we gotta show up even stronger.
If they're escalating their tactics, she says, then so are we. And what does she mean by that? If law enforcement is actually deployed to the streets of LA to stop the violence, to stop the assaults on law enforcement, to stop the obstruction of justice, to stop those who are deliberately and willfully and violently trying to impede the lawful deportation of criminal aliens, which I suppose it's not actually happening at this moment because the ICE raids that people are supposedly so outraged about were actually a money laundering cartel scheme, according to Trump's border czar, Tom Homan. None of this would be possible without radical politicians like Eunice Hernandez, like Karen Bass, like Gavin Newsom, who make excuses publicly for the riots that are happening. They encourage the violence, they foment the violence, and they gaslight you. They don't care that you're hurt. They don't care that our country is at risk here. That's their goal. The reason that this is their hill to die on, the reason that this is their vanguard moment, is because I think we have this this post. DC Drano phrased it better than I've seen anybody else phrase this. Spencer, if you have that X post that we were talking about earlier about what happens, I think it's 740,000 deportations happen in a blue state, and that's one seat in Congress that Democrats lose. Because the way that our Constitution is written, and I know there's debate about the way our Constitution is written, but the way that our census works is our census accounts for people in the United States regardless of their legal status. So if you are here as an illegal alien, you are counted in the census of the United States. And the census of the United States is used for districting Congress. So if there are a massive amount of illegal aliens in a particular district, that's going to increase the number of representatives to Congress that are from that district. Yeah, there's the post from DC Drano, Rogan O'Handley. He said every 740,000 illegal aliens deported from a blue state is minus one congressional seat in 2030. This is why they would rather burn their city down to stop Trump. So illegal aliens aren't necessarily coming here and casting their ballots. And they might be casting their ballots. I'm not saying they're not. I'm saying every illegal alien is not coming here and casting their ballots. But the way that their presence is a form of voter fraud is because our census counts illegal aliens in the census, which is used for districting for congressional representation. So for all this enormous number of illegals, when they're removed from our country, it causes Democrats in Congress to lose a seat. When Democrats in Congress lose a seat, they lose their power. This was always the strategy. To use illegal immigration, open borders, not only to destroy the sovereignty of the United States, but to overwhelm our welfare systems so that we were spending so much money that our dollar was devalued, to throw us into chaos, but also to enshrine almost permanent power for the Democrats in Congress. Because when you have this influx of illegals coming in, you have this influx of Democrat representatives going to Congress, which means Republicans don't have a stand a chance competing against them. This is why they're freaking out. This is why they're not going to stop. This is why they are continuing to escalate. And this is why it is so important for Congress to hold accountable the particular man who is behind the funding of these protests. Because these protests, these riots, the violence would not happen without the funding. We will be watching Neville Singum to see whether he responds to the request from the House Oversight Committee from Congressman Anna Paulina Luna to turn over evidence of funding the Communist Party that is behind the illegal alien riot in LA. We will be watching, and he will face a subpoena if he does not voluntarily respond. He will be called before Congress if he does not voluntarily respond, because he is in violation of the Foreign Agent Registration Act because he's acting on behalf of the Communist Party and he hasn't registered as an agent of those Chinese commies. All right, before we go, I want to take a moment to talk to all the wives and daughters and sons too out there. Father's Day is almost here. And if you're scrambling for a gift, sometimes I do this. My dad's a hard guy to buy a gift for. Don't worry. I've got you. Forget the last minute grill gadget or coffee mug. What the man in your life really wants is something that speaks to who he is. In a world that mocks his masculinity, his traditional values, his fatherhood even, he needs a place that still has his back. That's where Blaze TV comes in. It's where unapologetic conservative voices call out that nonsense, that poison, and stand up for what's right, faith, family, and freedom. And right now, you can grab our Father's Day special, $30 off an annual subscription when you use the code DAD30. It's this week only, though. It's fast, it's easy, you don't have to wrap it. It actually means something. So if you are still giftless, and I confess I am, this is your moment to win Father's Day. Think of it as peace of mind. Think of it as firepower for his convictions. Skip the predictable gifts. He's got enough of them. This Father's Day, give him something that actually matters. Go to blazetv.com/Liz. Use code DAD30 to grab the deal and remind him he's not alone. blazetv.com/Liz. Use code DAD30. And I know. I promised yesterday we'd talk about Elon versus Trump, and look at what happened. We've gone overtime once again. We're not going to have time to talk about that. I'll promise you, we'll see if this promise stands. I'll promise you we'll talk about it tomorrow. I do have things to say about it. I know it was last week and Elon has gone back to posting red hearts about Donald Trump on X, but there is something important to talk about related to that it's being called a feud. It's being called a breakup. My experience was it was a very funny day on X with all the memes, but we'll talk about the implications of the breakdown in the Trump-Elon relationship hopefully tomorrow, but I guess it depends on the developments that happen as a result of everything we talked about today on the show. Make sure you're subscribed. Go to youtube.com/Liz Wheeler. Go to x.com/Liz_Wheeler. Go over to Spotify. We've got video over there now. Please subscribe on Spotify. And make sure you share this episode of the show, regardless of what platform you choose to watch it. Please take to your social media. Send it to your family group chat. Share this information far and wide because your voice, your participation, our partnership on the show is actively making a difference in saving our country from the communist leftists who hate us. Thank you for watching today. Thank you for listening. I'm Liz Wheeler. This is The Liz Wheeler Show.